Welcome to the Expanding Worlds podcast. I'm your host, Debra Caldow. And welcome to this series on planning the journey, where I'm sharing my own experiences of the 4 areas that the podcast focuses on: daily living, relationships, purpose, and financial. So this week I'm talking about the financial line. In many ways, this is the most important line for anyone supporting a young person with additional needs. It's also a line that, from my experiences, worries people a lot, because long-term, it's the one which can cause real negative consequences if it's not planned out properly. The one thing that I think is important to realise when it comes to planning out the financial line is that we need to start with understanding the concept of enough. Because the one thing that we often feel is that whatever we do, however much we leave our children, it may never be enough. But enough means thinking about our children and what their personal goals and priorities are. For some people, having enough money may mean covering their essential expenses such as housing, food, healthcare. But for others, it may be about things like holidays and hobbies. And our definition of enough shouldn't be based on comparisons with others. It's more about aligning financial resources with personal values, needs, and aspirations. It's about finding that balance between meeting the needs of the young person rather than just looking to accumulate more money. When I think about what is enough for my daughter, it's about ensuring that she has the resources she needs for a comfortable lifestyle, which provides her with a sense of security and also gives us that sense of security as well, that she actually has enough. Then after thinking about enough and what that might look like, the next big question is about control. As always, you're the expert on your child. So how much or how little control you believe is right for them is down to your knowledge of them. For us, we see control as a changing thing. As my daughter gets older, we expect she will take over more control of her day-to-day finance. But, and it's quite a big but, there will always be part of her financial life that we will plan and we will keep control over. And although I use the word control, this is not about us being controlling. This is about understanding her limitations when it comes to money. I'm not sure that she's that different from anyone her age anyway, in that she likes to spend money, often on things of no real use, but then again, she'd probably say the same of me. But she is vulnerable when it comes to money, and there are plenty of scams and scammers out there who would like to separate her from her money, I'm sure. So the options to consider when it comes to planning out how the financial line will look comes back to this point of how much or how little control they have. The option where our children have least control is obviously a guardianship, where you, or when you're no longer around, someone you nominate will make all the decisions around money. I know guardianships aren't just about money, but they are a very effective way to protect our children in this area. We've chosen not to use a guardianship because we didn't feel it was the right thing for our daughter. And we believe that by protecting the main part of the financial security that we build for her, that will leave her with enough protection. However, I'm aware that for many people, guardianships are the right choice, and they're in place not only to protect the financial health of our children, but also the physical and mental health as well. So they might be the right decision for you and your child. However, I would add that this does not necessarily mean that they cannot have control over the choices they make and what they spend their money on. This is also about dignity and the feeling that they have some control over their lives. No matter how much we want to protect our children, we also owe them the dignity of some risk. So while we haven't used a guardianship, what we do have in place is a trust, and this is actually the centre of our financial plan for our daughter. I'm no expert on trusts and can only talk about why we think this is the best option for our daughter. If you're thinking about getting one, it's essential you get professional advice from experts. So in other words, don't listen to your friends, your family, or to me. Wherever you live in the world, even if the basic trust idea is the same, there'll be different rules and types of trusts, and it's important to get good professional advice because it's something that will be around long after you're not around. What I do know about trusts is that they enable us to protect assets for our daughter. And that by doing it this way, we don't limit the state assistance she's entitled to in any way. This is important because although she may not need it right now, circumstances can change, and we want her to be eligible for state support if she ever needs it. I'd always thought about trusts as the realm of the wealthy, but once you start looking into them, you'll soon realise that it's a fairly simple idea. And at least from our experience, it wasn't as expensive as we thought it would be to set it up. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's super easy, but it's so important that it's actually worth the pain to get one in place. However, while setting it up wasn't as hard as I expected, who would be the trustees has been much harder in terms of deciding who will be trustees after we're no longer around. So right now, my husband and I are the trustees, but that's temporary for the obvious reasons. She has a sister, so that's one person who could take over from us. But that inevitably brings up that issue I've discussed before, which is this idea that my youngest daughter doesn't want her older sister controlling her life. There's no doubt her sister will play, and already does play, a really important role in her life. But we would really like that to be more of a mentor role, so that their relationship is based on caring, not being a carer. So the big issues when it comes to thinking about trustees' age and skills, because we need to appoint trustees to replace us who are younger than us. And on top of that, they need to have the skills to manage a trust. In terms of helping them with decision making, we've already created documents outlining our wishes for the trust. Now, of course, trustees don't need to follow these, which is why we will always have an external professional as one of our trustees. And that will have an ongoing cost to the trust. So the downside here is, of course, the cost. But the upside is having someone who has professional skills and obligations to the trust. Another option which we're still looking into, but which I'm sure will form part of our plan, is this idea of microboards. A microboard is a type of legal entity or a not-for-profit organisation consisting of a small group of people who assist a person in various ways, including managing money and assets and decision-making. So essentially, I see a microboard as a formalised group of mentors. And if you're interested in finding out a bit more about microboards, it's a topic discussed in episode 119. And microboards can be used in conjunction with trusts to help manage financial assets and ensure that a person's best interests are always at the forefront of any decision making. The main advantage I think microboards have is it's a way of getting different people with different skills and knowledge working together for the benefit of one person. So guardianships and trusts offer total control or partial control over spending and control of assets. The other option is to give total control to your child. This is not something we've considered because we've never felt our daughter will ever be in a position where she has the skills she needs to manage all the financial aspects of her life. Day to day, yes, we fully expect her to manage all that. But the bigger picture issues like where she lives and ensuring that all of her bills are paid and there's an emergency fund in place, should she ever need it, probably not going to be part of her skill set, even as she matures. She'll always be vulnerable to people who decide to take advantage of her. We see our legacy to not only be the assets we leave her in trust, but the way we protect her against people who want to exploit her. Of course, we can't protect her in every way, in every situation. None of us can do that. But the way that we've set things up, we know she will never be homeless and she will never be cold in the home that she lives. And if we get the microboard part of this right, then she'll always have a group of people looking out for her. When it comes to helping her manage her own money, we have for quite a few years now been working with her. She has a separate bank account with cards for daily things like going to the cafe and meeting friends, and other accounts for clothes and personal items that she needs. And she has a set amount of money going into these accounts. It goes without saying that she has on occasion overspent and been in a situation where her card has been declined. This is something that we're still managing. So yes, there has been some embarrassment and there's been some stress associated with this situation. But we've always tried to ensure that these situations only ever happen when there's support there for her. And like anything, we don't want our children to make bad decisions, but sometimes they need to learn from their choices and experience the consequences of poor decision-making in that controlled environment. But I think the single most valuable thing that we can teach her when it comes to managing her own money and her spending is delayed gratification. To be honest, if you can get this one thing embedded, it will help her in so many ways. We've also talked to her about advertising and what these adverts are trying to do to get us to buy something we might not actually need. It's an ongoing conversation, and to be fair, over time, I can see she's getting better. But like any other skill she's ever learned, it's going to take repetition and practice. And also, it's often the case with our young people. They look at what we do, so we try and model the kind of behaviour that we're encouraging her to learn. But of course, I know the big issue here is pushback and frustration, and the ways that we've tried to deal with this is by helping her try to visualise how much longer it'll be. And when she does reach a financial goal, so she saves up enough money to buy a specific thing, we also make a massive deal out of it because it's about reinforcing behaviour and creating that habit loop so that there's reward at the end of the effort. But I won't lie, teaching delayed gratification takes time and an awful lot of patience. I can see that she's getting better at it, and I try to make her understand that she's doing well, and just to reinforce for her that it's part of taking responsibility for her own life and her own money and being an adult. There are also other strategies we use to try and get her to think about her spending. At the end of every week and then every month, she tracks what she's spent on the spreadsheet. This isn't so much about sticking to a budget. It's about seeing how much she's spent and getting a feeling for how much things cost. She's also just about to start a paid job, so that will bring new challenges. As I've said before, we've decided that she will control any money she gets directly, so we have to be willing to let her make some mistakes. But we've already started to have that conversation about what it will mean having paid work, and that she will need to pay her own way, including paying rent. This will obviously be a minimal amount, but even if it's something that she doesn't need to actually do, it's about practicing and understanding that this is where part of the money that she earns needs to go. The reality is, though, that she may never really grasp the concept of value and what is cheap and what is expensive. So it's really about strategies to ensure that she thinks about what she spends her money on. And when it comes to enough as part of her life plan, we will use trusts, trustees, and a microboard for when we're no longer around. And these will be the foundation of her financial security. Thanks for listening. I want to say again that planning this financial line is not as hard as some people imagine, but it's essential. And the earlier we start, the better foundation that we can create. Next week is the last episode in this series, and I'll be focusing on how to bring the 4 lines together and what a life plan for our young people should look like. If you enjoyed the episode, then please do share it with others. And of course, if you have time, leave a review wherever you listen to the podcast. If you have any feedback, I'd love to hear from you. You can get in touch, Debra@expandingworlds.com, or send me a message online. You can find me at Debra Caldow on most platforms.